Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, an entitled Karen demands I give her son my electric wheelchair because he is tired and I am clearly faking my disability because I'm too young to be in a wheelchair. This Karen is doing some serious mental gymnastics, and now let's dive right into the story. So I am in my mid-20s and I need to use a wheelchair due to issues with my hips. I can only stand for a few seconds without support, so I'm pretty much in the wheelchair 90% of the time. I use an electric chair because I find it much easier for me personally. Despite this, I do everything else people my age do, and that includes going to amusement parks with my friends. Sometimes it can actually be cool since we get handicap parking and I get a pass to make the park a little bit easier for me. The way things work for me with rides is that I'm able to get onto most rides with some assistance, and the chair will sit by the exit waiting for me where I will get help back into it. My friends and staff are both amazing when it comes to this, and after the first couple rides of any trip, things start running smoothly. Of course, there are a lot more rides and we take breaks for things like games and food. So then, let me set the scene for when Karen and her son walk in. My friends are wasting money on the games that they will never win for a price that is not even worth it. Meanwhile, I am sitting in my chair and eating a corn dog and laughing at them from about 10 feet away. I place myself in a way that I'm not in the way of people trying to play games and also not blocking foot traffic. It is a learned skill that took me a while. Anyway, here comes Karen with a kid that is probably 7-ish years old. Could be more or less, I don't spend much time around kids, but he was not super little, that's the point I want to make. I feel a tap on my shoulder and I turn to see Karen standing way too close to me. Like, she was bent down inches from my face. Like, lady, I don't want to smell what you ate for breakfast. Me, can I help you? Karen, yes, you can get up. Me, well, actually I can't, and who the hell do you think you are telling me to do something like that? Karen, don't argue with your elders. I told you to get up, so you need to just do it. Me, and yet I'm still sitting right here. Amazing how human choice works, huh? Karen, can't you see how tired my son is? I finally look and notice the kid she is with who is looking around at all the games. He does not look tired at all and instead is pulling on his mom's hand in the universal language of, let's go this way. Karen, we've been walking for hours and there are no empty benches for him to sit. Plus, he wants to still move around. So get up and give him your chair for a while to go around the park. Me, you do realize this is a wheelchair, right? This is not some bench seat for when people get tired. I need it to be actually able to move. Karen, you're too young to need that. Give it to my son right now. Me, no. This is my chair and you're actually insane if you think I'm just gonna give you my medical equipment. She then got the idea to go behind me and lift the chair so I would fall out of it. I hit the pavement pretty hard and was dazed for a few minutes. The next piece of the story was told to me by one of my friends after things settled down. Karen sat in my chair, put the kid in her lap and started to just roll away down the row of games. My friends had seen the interaction, but since I'm the most extroverted of the group, I knew that I could handle yelling at a Karen alone. Once I hit the ground though, they were chasing her and telling one of the people running the games to call security. They caught up to her easily as running is always going to be faster than my chair. Stopping her without getting their feet run over was the more challenging part, but they basically kept her in a small area until somebody from the park could arrive and help things out. Minus 2 friends who stayed to help me off of the ground and hold me up. Luckily, the people running these games have crappy folding chairs on their end for when times get slow. One brought theirs out and I very awkwardly sat in it and waited. It was better than no chair, but hard to keep myself balanced upright without help. Meanwhile, my friends were with Karen and security explaining that she had just stolen my wheelchair and pushed me out of it. Karen claimed that it was her child's and they had gotten it when they entered the park because he was disabled. The park does have chairs, but they are not electric and clearly labeled as being the property of the amusement park itself. When that was pointed out to Karen, she said that they must have just gotten electric ones and security did not know about it yet. Then my friends pointed out in the wheelchair back pocket had a bag with my medication and even my wallet inside of it. The wallet having my ID that labels me as handicapped. They all then come over to where I am and then conclude that the wheelchair is mine and I get back into it. Karen is yelling and ready to walk away in a huff, but they don't let her just yet. They say she cannot leave until after they ask me if I want to press charges for assault. I say yes, and she throws an absolute fit, calling the entire thing sexist because she is a single mother and how she did not do anything. Even though we had witnesses that work at the park that saw her throw me out of my chair and try to steal it. We all then go to another area of the park where they have a medical tent and I get checked out. Nothing looks too bad and I didn't hit my head, so I don't have to worry about a concussion. My hip hurts a bit, but I've had a lot worse and I know that it is not anything serious. The police come and Karen thinks she is smart, saying that if my hip hurts it means I can feel it and that means I'm not disabled. Nobody else thinks that's clever and the police ask what we want to do about this whole situation. Pressing charges would mean leaving, and also we had crossed state lines, so I did not know if I wanted to deal with potentially having to come back over all of this. I agreed to let things go if Karen was removed from the park so I would not run into her again. She started yelling that suddenly it was her son's birthday and that meant he had to stay at the park and if I didn't want to be near her, I should leave. Then the park manager who had shown up at one point told her that he did not allow assault in his park and that she was already getting kicked out and banned for the rest of the season. The only choice was if she was gonna walk out on her own or if the police were gonna have to drag her out. Spoiler alert, she did not go quietly. We got over the whole ordeal pretty quickly as we had a lot more rides to enjoy and greasy food to eat. It was not my first Karen encounter, but it was so far the only one that flat out tried to steal my chair from under me. And yeah, ripe stars, there we have it again, an entitled Karen that claims that young people cannot be in the wheelchair simply because they are too young to be disabled. That is really one of the dumbest things you could possibly say. If you enjoy the stories about outrageous stupid Karens, then please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel and maybe even post a comment if you want to support me. Thank you so much. And the next one is titled Travel Revenge. So I don't travel very often, it's even more uncommon for me to fly, and therefore when I do fly, I always like to get a window seat. So then last week when I was boarding my flight, I was frustrated when I came to my seat and this lady was in my seat. She and her friend were sitting in the window and middle seat while the aisle seat was open. Thinking she was just confused, I asked her, "Hey ma'am, I'm sorry, but I think you're in my seat." "This is my seat, kid, you're reading it wrong. I'm in my early 20s and definitely have a baby face. I'm kind of mad now and I go to show her my boarding pass. "Well, actually, I have my ticket right here and it says," she interrupts me, "I do this way more than you, kid. Sit down in your seat there." I'm livid, but I don't want to hold the whole plane up, so I quietly sit down and simmer. While I'm sitting there, I overhear her and her friend mention how tight their connecting flight is in DFW and how they were worried that they won't get off the plane quick enough. Checkmate, you seat-jacking Karen. So I sit back and enjoy the flight. Anytime I want to look out the window, I careen over their laps in a way that is super uncomfortable for everyone because I'll be getting the view I paid for, thank you very much. And then when we land, I get my petty revenge. I take my sweet time getting my bag out from under my seat. I stand up slow and stretch and insist that the 2 rows behind us go before I do, seeing as the worst 2 players of the aviation musical chairs in the nation cannot get out till I do. I then walk slowly down the aisle and shake both flight attendants' hands on my way out. The Karens ran out of there as soon as we rounded the corner. I felt great. And yeah, ripe stars, if you have ever gotten revenge on someone on an airplane, then please let me know in the comments. The next one is titled Amazing Revenge. I am a child born out of wedlock, but I'm not the only one. I got a fraternal twin brother and we will call him Dill. When my mother and father, who were both 25 at the time, found out that they were having twins, my father left my mother in the hospital the day after we were born. Growing up, he was never in our lives and my mother did not have any ill intent towards him though. We resented the mention of a father who we have never seen or met in our lives and were generally happy with my single mom. Even there were days my mother would share old Polaroids of them together, saying things like how we look like our father and how those were great days, but how nothing could compare to the day we were born. Fast forward 18 years old and Dill and I were at our graduation from high school. My entire mom's side of the family was there to celebrate, take pictures and then have an after party at my aunt's home. Before that could happen though, my mother said she had a surprise for us at between the crowd. A man was emerging. Dill and I soon felt a terrible distaste as we could tell this man was the man who seemed to walk out on my mother all those years ago. We felt hatred towards this man even if my mother smiled whenever she would talk about him. Our father cried, in turn making my mother cry, as they soon told us how he was involved in our lives even if it wasn't in person or physical. My parents told us that when we were born, they agreed that they couldn't take care of twins with the income they had. With a worded agreement, my parents agreed that my father would have to walk out for most of our lives to support us and send off money from a job miles away from our birth town. So, the years of birthdays, cars, Christmas presents, Halloween costumes and Thanksgiving dinner was not only paid by my mother, but our father as well. They handed us envelopes that they said was for our college tuition. Our father even took us by the hands and got on his knees while crying. As if on an instant, it was like our resentment towards this man fluttered away. I cried and Dill was helping him up. Without a second thought, we embraced our parents and my father would not stop apologizing. Our relationship with our father 9 years later could not be stronger and we bond any way children and their father could have. With their help, we graduated from college, me in business and fashion, while my brother in computer science. We are both 27 now, doing things we both love. Now you're probably wondering, maybe they got revenge on their father who abandoned them for 18 years. I'm here to tell you, no it isn't. My pro-revenge story is about the woman our father brought to our high school graduation. Our stepmother, her name being Heather for this story as for privacy reasons. Heather was and still is married to our father. At first glance she was a very nice looking woman and we were happy that our father was in love with someone. Our mother had no qualms about the marriage as she was partially the instigator for my father's proposal. Heather was about 5 years younger than my father, who is 53 years old now and has 3 other boys, 6, 8 and 19 then. 15, 16 and 28 now with another husband. We also get very well along with them, my brother and I loving the fact that we are friendly, kind and sweet stepbrothers who would step in if anything was wrong. However, what we first thought was not at all what it seemed like. The story, within the first 6 years we got to know our father and Heather, we noticed that Heather was extremely babied and spoiled by our father. She and our stepbrothers wore clothing brands and had expensive devices. My father told us that he would shower us the same way if we pleased, but we passed on the offer as just reconnecting our father and the times he spoiled our behinds off when we were children, while we resented him was enough to spoil us rotten. The days we would spend at our father's house, I would wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or drink water, to hear Heather shouting at my father, who would attempt to quickly calm her down in a non-threatening fashion. I did not understand why he was being yelled at, but it slowly pricked at me whenever I experienced it. It was not until I realized that my father would often visit us with scratch marks, cuts and bruises on his face and sometimes even his arms. That was always unsettling to my brother and I when our father would joke that a cat would dig in their trash or some random excuse that was an obvious lie. We figured we could not do anything until our father would stop bottling up his truth. Our stepbrother, the eldest who we will call Matt, came with us to go drinking and dancing on our 25th birthday. My brothers got wasted. I had a bad experience with an ex-boyfriend and drinking, so I stayed away from the drinking. Therefore, I was the designated driver for that day. With the help of a few less drunk friends, I managed to get my brother in the car, Matt in the front and Dylan in the back, his face pressing against a leather cushion while bumbling something silly. As we drove home, Matt was slowly getting sober, but I could tell he couldn't fully comprehend what he was saying. He smiled at me with his silly drunk face and slurred some stuff about how lucky we were to have such a caring father and how much his younger brother loved us. That made me happy until he would blurt out something that made me uneasy. What came out of his mouth would make me seethe with rage. "Our mom always talks bad about him and your mother to us. Mom hits him too," he said with a laugh before he leaned against the door and said he was tired and went to sleep. How dare she? I would think as I got to my mother's house and got my brothers up enough to help them stumble into the house. I would tell my brother and my mother what Matt had said when he was drunk. My Dill was pissed when he found out and my mother was just in shock as she thought she was good friends with Heather. Dill confronted Matt 2 weeks later about what Heather would do to our father and why. Matt said that he knew Heather was extremely manipulative and spoiled, so much so that Matt's father was angry with Heather and divorced her after she had cheated with his slightly more wealthy friend. He told us Heather would scratch, throw stuff, threaten and belittle my father whenever she didn't get what her or any of her children wanted immediately. My father, being the kind man he is, would tolerate it and give her anything she pleased with a smile. Matt would be forced to stop her before anything worse could happen. There would be days where she took her kids and stayed at her parents' house if my father would attempt to refuse or tell her that funds were low. It was terrible. When she had found out our father was tucking aside money for our college funds, she would talk terribly in text and in person to her children about my father being a filthy, broke Cambodian immigrant and not loving her, my mother being a gold-digging woman, a white witch trying to coax my father into help paying for our lives on the side. We were disgusted and pissed at Heather. She would hurt our father and talk horribly of my parents without looking at her entitled self. This was a moment where we would need to put her where she belonged. We wanted to ruin her, but we settled on changing the way our father would look at her, which would be damaging her in a special way. Dill, Matt and I came up with a plan. Dill and I were our father's pride and joy after all, so why not put one of ourselves as bait? With the three of us we scrounged up money, we saved up together from jobs, birthday monies, gigs and side tutorings from the several years we grew up together. Dill and I were saving money to buy my mother and her boyfriend a new place to live, as their place was being littered with pests ranging from rats to termites each summer. So the money we pulled together came up to around $2,800. After an argument with Dill, it was decided that I would be the one to enact the pro-revenge. So the revenge, after the 3 months of gathering and careful planning, I had taken the money and told my father and Heather that we wanted to buy mother and her boyfriend a home to live in. My father asked my budget and I pull out the money, making an effort to count it in front of them to push the bait. When Heather saw the money, I could see her eyes widen in surprise. My father told me that we were good kids, that he was proud of us, that we grew up to be kind people. I felt kind of guilty. I was gonna contort my father's feelings towards this woman. I was hesitant but looked at Heather's face and I was determined. We spent the next hour finding a good home for my mother, settling on one as we would visit the real estate place the next morning. I took the money and went to my room. I hid the cash under my bed mattress, the most obvious place a person would hide it, right? During the whole house finding, my brothers were setting up something in my room, something that was not in my room before. One of those large Valentine teddy bears that Dill had gotten me when my ex-boyfriend dumped me on Valentine's Day. Matt, Dill and I would leave the house, go to our mother's house under the guise of saying that we were gonna tell her the surprise. Fast forward 5 hours later, we go back to my father's house. He was at work doing the night shift as a security guard. When we walked into my room, I was visibly surprised as all my drawers of my dressers were pulled out, my closet was ravaged through and my bed mattress was flipped. We did not expect a hurricane to go through my room needlessly. The teddy bear was also disturbed, thrown on the ground with its face to the ground. We were slightly panicked as Dill had picked up the teddy and ripped out threads of its back and pulled out something. I went to call my father, a little panicked, and said my room was rummaged through and the money was gone. Honestly, I was actually scared because it was most of the money Dill and I saved to actually get my mother a place, thinking it would have been spent soon enough. My father was panicked, saying he would be home as fast as he can. As soon as my father got home, I was joined in my room with Matt, Dill and our father. Dill and I expressed our disappointment and anger to my father about Heather. Next to my laptop was a camera that Matt had received from his dad. It was plugged into the computer as Dill asked my father to sit down and watch the video. The video played. It had showed an empty room before Heather had walked in, not at all sneakily as she pulled out my drawers, pulled my clothes out and threw it to the ground before repeating it with my closet. She even walked over straight to the bear and picked it off before frustratingly throwing it to the ground. It was facing most of the ground for the time as there was no sound either. As the video ended, Dill and I could see the gears clicking in our father's head. Our father was kind, not dense after all. In our 9 years of knowing this man, we have never seen him angry until that night alone. Dad had called Heather telling her to come home immediately. She got home 4 hours later with 3 bags of brand name clothing. I felt my heart break as I already knew she had probably spent all of that money. I started to choke back my sobs as Dill would try to calm me down, being angry himself. Matt just staring at his mother with a face of disappointment. My father began to ruthlessly shout at Heather. He reprimanded her for spending all the hard-earned money of their children. She scoffed, handing over the envelope with only 3/4 of the original money and some change. This only made my father more angry as he would shout at her to get out of his house, threatening to divorce her and throw her onto the streets without the items. Her eyes got wide and her face contorted into a face of, "Oh no!" She began to plead and beg as my father forcefully turned her around and pushed her out of the house, still yelling at how horrible she was. Matt was forced to follow because even if she was a horrible person, she was still his mother. For only 10 minutes, Heather begged and begged to be let back in before she was forced to leave my father's property. My father apologized profusely that night as I did nothing but stare at the leftover money and cry in my room. My father is still married to that woman, but he refused to look at her most of the time or sleep in the same bed. He still loves her in a way as a husband would a wife, but now it's different for him as his wife was the filthy thief of his blood and flesh. We had given Matt his portion of the bait money and was given back a little of the money when Heather returned a few of the items back to the stores. Fortunately, 2 years later, we finally bought my mother a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in a non-infested neighborhood, and she was unbelievably grateful. Maybe now it's time to help save up divorce money. And yeah, Ripe Stars, honestly, I feel good for OP that the story sort of took a positive turn in the end, but I also feel bad for OP's father, because clearly he is in an abusive, manipulative relationship, and nobody deserves to be with a woman like Heather, or any partner in general like that. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.